Little Wing, of course, I was using the amps for real. I have a bass drum mic I'm using on this amp. I probably would have normally used a vocal mic. I just went to the practice space and couldn't find them, so I grabbed that, and I'm recording the bass amp, so it made sense to me. It's the bass side things. And on this side, I'm using a gauge microphones. I forgot the number on this guy. I don't think it says. If you look on the site, you could recognize it by the shape, but it's kind of like the middle of the road one. It's a vocal mic. Probably not the ideal mic for that, but I was happy with the results. This is my Peavey Vintage. You might think it's in Peavey Classic, but it's actually about 20 years before that. The Peavey Classics are like a 90s amp that they still make. But in the 70s, Peavey was actually the first company, to my understanding, that did a reissue of the Fender Bassman. So I read some interviews with Hartley Peavey about it, and he said, people were starting to ask and come into music stores and ask, hey, you got one of those old Bassmans I can find? Like, it was just a sound that, people weren't finding replaced. No one was making something that sounded like that, and it was obviously it's kind of one of those things Leo Fender got right. And he got a lot of things right. Well, anyway, this is even more right to me. I love this thing. It's not 50 watts like a Bassman. It's 100 watts of tubes. Tube power. It does have a preamp and master volume. The preamp will give you definitely gives you some distortion, but it's not really my cup of tea. But by raising the main, the master volume, and just putting the pre-volume at under 7, I get a pretty nice. It's an incredible clean amp. So anyway, it's got reverb as well, which a Bassman wouldn't. Not really trying to get into a Peavey promotional here, but I have definitely played some great Peavey amps, and this one I just walked in the music store, started playing it, was sold. This one I picked up because it was cheap on Craigslist, also a Peavey. Again, not a lot of brand loyalty, really. I'd play a Fender, I'd play other stuff, but anyway, this is really meant to be a metal head, but it's 120 watts, and it has a great clean channel, and so I just used the clean channel. I always have gotten my sort of low to mid-level distortion from, well, not always, but some sort of tube thing, and anyway, this has been my favorite through the years, the tube drivers. So that's the Butler tube driver. And so then I'm going to get another Super Overdrive. I've had that Super Overdrive a long time. And so I just use that because it takes that next level of distortion, and it really does compress the sound a little more, making it always seem loud. Compression, if you haven't gotten into that whole subject, compression is something that takes the quiet sounds and brings them closer to the loud sounds. So even when you don't hit a string as hard, it still is loud, basically. So, I've tried running 2 tube distortion pedals in a row, and I was never happy with that result. I really feel like the tube distortion is best for rhythm playing, and when you want to play a lead, for my style, with a lot of distortion on my leads, I like a solid state pedal more, and that's what Stevie Ray Vaughan did. He actually, my understanding is, he used 2 tube screamers. Of course, that's the classic Ibanez pedal, and I've also heard it said, the guitarist from the Cult said, I think Billy Duffy is his name, said a Super Overdrive pedal, it's the same pedal. It's going to give you basically the same tone. I don't know. Since I have it so distorted after going through, because I leave the tube driver on and then I ram super overdrive into it, I figure it wouldn't really matter what I put in front of it. So, and as evidence of that, so this Ibanez Power Lead, probably something from about 1990. I don't know, I just found it sitting around in a practice room. It doesn't sound much different because they're both getting crammed into the tube driver. So that's what on the little wing, for the first verse, the cleaner part, I am using the tube drivers. I turned the tube drive down a little bit. It's at a slightly lower level than what I had on the Van Halen song. And then for the solo, of course, I had all overdrive pedals on and a high degree of distortion, obviously. So it was just live with these amps, and then it was I actually used some of the camera audio. I mixed in some of the camera audio when I got into the video editing software, and I just the camera actually has stereo audio, and I just found when I was pulling it out, it lost a lot of the liveliness of the room, and I just felt like it more fit the character of the Stevie Ray Vaughan sound. And obviously you would never use a camera on your real recordings, but it actually has pretty darn good mics in it. So you could put out area mics or further away mics in addition to your close mics, if you were doing studio recording with real amps. And I don't know, to some degree you can't replace it. I sort of had to get my chops back up. I've mostly been on the internet figuring out how I'm going to start this business and how I'm going to get this to you guys, which I'm interested in doing, getting people who are interested to try this stereo approach and sort of bring the guitar up to the modern era here. And I haven't been playing guitar much for a while, and so when I started making these videos, I've been playing a lot more. I hardly even have calluses back. I mean, when I started, I didn't have any. So with the Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff, that was actually one of the first really tough kind of solos I learned, and it was probably transcribed in Guitar World or something long ago, and it was such a great song to learn, but I just feel like it has dominated my lead playing forever. I feel like I use little licks, little bits out of those two parts that I played. I've used them ever since I learned them, and it's a main part of how I play. And I don't listen to Stevie Ray all the time, and I was in a blues band, and gosh, when the blues band was over, I was like, if I never hear Stevie Ray again, I think that might be all right. He's great, but it's not really my thing, not really my cup of tea, but it certainly has influenced my playing a lot. So, anyway, I think I'm approaching too much information. I want to make sure I really deliver on the promise of too much information here. I had to record both the intro and the solo many times, really to get what I thought was an acceptable performance. I'm sure I'll get some comments that tell me I suck. It's the usual, it's the usual. I was happy with them. I feel like there's some energy there and some communication. And took lots of recordings of it. And, the microphones went into Pro Tools, and then I pulled in the video to my computer, mixed them. On the output from these amps, I still actually compressed them quite a bit and ran them through an EQ. And I say that because this is actually information that's worthwhile, unlike a lot of this gibberish. If you just record your two amps and plow them into, and you just you have them on Pro Tools and you pan one to one side and one to the other and you listen to it, you know, it's not going to like blow your mind, because, you know, nobody records guitar that way. And as I was listening to the Little Wing, I just listened to a little bit of Stevie Ray Vaughan's Little Wing, and, you know, you put earphones on and everything, you go, oh man, yeah, of course they're using studio compressors, and, you know, not to some weird level, but it's just, it's, you know, in a live performance, everything's so loud, your ears are approaching their limit, and they're overdriving, so your ears provide the compression, you know, and so, you know, it's a pendulum swing, and I'm just saying, if you just record your stereo guitar, you don't do anything to it, don't expect to be blown away. I mean, you will get some, it'll be cool, you'll get some cool stuff right off the bat, but when you're really going like, okay, now, would I listen to this? You know, if you didn't spend a lot of time placing your mics and getting your tone right in the headphones and all that, then you're going to tweak it after you record it, and just like every recording ever. And to some degree, you know, it's a little more work because you've got two different amps and different mics, and so you'll listen to one, listen to the other, and mix them. I'm just trying to say, I'm super happy with it. I never was like, oh gosh, this is really getting too hard. It was just like, oh, okay, well, I've got two. I've got two sources. I've got to EQ them separately, but then make sure they sound good together. Oh, this is another big deal. Panning them all the way on both of these songs just didn't end up being the right thing. I think I panned Van Halen, Little Wing. I think I panned that a little less. I think I might have panned it 50% and 50% that way. And then Van Halen was wider. It was like 80 and 80% panned, but I didn't pan them hard, like 100% that way, 100% that way. It was like 80-80 and for Little Wing 50-50. And then the final trivia thing. You may have noticed on 5150, you hear me kicking the floor. And that happened because when I was recording it, I could hear my heel pounding through the camera feed. So I was listening and trying to sync up the audio and the video, and I could hear that sound from the video tracks, and I thought, oh, that's like fun, that's like cool energy. So then I committed myself to more than I wanted to, but I got I figured out how to rip the audio from the camera into Pro Tools. I had to get it all synced up, and then I just basically put a low-pass filter on it and just chopped off every frequency, all the frequencies over about 110 hertz. So that left me with just the pounding of the floor. Yeah, so there's all the data on those two recordings, I believe. And the Van Halen one, I didn't want any of the camera feed. I wanted that really close. The reason I went straight into the audio interface instead of using my amps, you can see I'm in a room with hardwood floors. This is not really a music studio. It's a living room. So I just started looking at it. I didn't have enough rugs to like do anything worthwhile, and I thought the room sound was good for Little Wing, and I thought it was not so good for 5150. So for 5150, I wanted it right out of my distortion pedals into the interface, and then I'm actually using from there a clean setting in Pro Tools, one of the clean choices. I think it was clean number 6 on the SansAmp software that comes with it. And I know there's lots of fancy amp emulators that have just gone like crazy in the level of detail you can get into. But what I've been happy with what I got out of the SansAmp stuff, and it was real easy to get something that I liked after just a little tweaking with it. And you know, again, final plug for this, I just feel there's more life. Like you just get, you're pumping twice as much life out of your guitar into your computer. And I can sit there and be inspired by that. And it's sort of above that threshold of how real is it. Whereas the mono feels a little bit like, okay, I don't know, it's not really moving me. And I just feel like that's what a great amp does. I think I'm getting very close to way too much information. I wonder, you know, how many other people have watched this far in this video. Well done for hanging out. But, you know, I feel like that's the job of a great amp, and what a tube, you know, a really great sounding tube amp does for me, and I think does for lots of people, is it inspires you to play guitar, and especially to play rhythm guitar. When I played with lower quality amps, played with practice amps, or an old crate solid state quadra drive, the 90s thing, it had some good tones, but it had a solid state output stage. And I'm not saying that can't be done right. It makes sense to me that it could be done right, but I've never played one that was really right. I've only played tube amps that were really inspiring and musical and made me want to write stuff and made me enjoy playing through different chords and finding something that really worked well. With a small amp, I just tend to noodle, you know. Noodling, you know, playing lead, it's all in your hands, and you know, I feel like I can get tones I want out of my hands, and if it's a high distortion setting, even if it's a cleaner sound, that's really something about it just being one string at a time. Most any amp will do a fair job of that, or you can get close with pedals to what you're trying to hear. But with the rhythm tone, if you don't have great sound and something that sounds rich and full and lets you hear the strings individually, even though you're mushing it all up in a distortion, you know, to me that's not going to be very inspiring, and it's not going to make you want to play. Okay, well. So now, deep into too much information, but this is the last point. You know, one thing about all the stereo setups that I had never heard of before was that they were all hard panned. They were either 3 strings to this amp and 3 treble strings to that amp, or the even numbered strings to one amp and the odd numbered strings to the other amp. That would be like on Top Jimmy, Van Halen's Top Jimmy. If you go back and listen to that, you hear the notes, they're bouncing back and forth. But what you don't get with either of those two things is, what about when you play 2 notes together right next to each other? If you play the 3rd and 4th string on either of those setups I just described, then it sounds like twin leads, because each amp is just hearing one sound, so they don't get kind of pushed together for that distortion that comes from a chord. It sounds like twin lead guitar, you know? So, but that never happens on the 6-pan double tone. You're never having 2 strings next to each other that are just utterly getting separated to the 2 amps. They're always a blend, and so you're always getting the natural reaction of distortion that you would expect. There's parts of Top Jimmy where he plays chords, and it's really strange because he's playing a chord, but, you know, these 2 C's, for instance, are going to one amp, and then these 2 other notes are going to the other one, and that's broken up in a weird way, which is cool, and, you know, but Eddie only used it once. He used it once then, and then I think he used that guitar again on the Different Kind of Truth album, and that's great, you know, gimmicks, you know, a couple times in one's career, that's totally awesome and cool to do something like, oh wow, boy, that guitar sounds different. Yeah, it's hexaphonic, and he did this, blah, blah, blah. But as your everyday tone solution, I don't think any of those hard panning things are an option. I don't think anybody's ever going to live with that. I know Gibson made a pickup like that too, where it went 4, the evens to one side and the odds to the other side. Anyway, okay, well, I feel like I've said too much. I feel like you probably hate me and you're like, I can't get that 15 minutes back. So I think I've delivered on my promise of too much babbling, too much thinking about all this stuff. Hopefully something in there was useful to you and helps you on your way to your stereo guitar rig and approaches and recordings. And thanks for listening.